Blog Talk Radio. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. We're delighted to have you today on our program. This is Women Veterans Speak. I am Kathy Santos, the host, and I'm so excited to have you with us today. It is Saturday with a little overcast here in the DMV area. And we are certainly looking forward to the fall that's creeping in here. It's been quite a summer, of course, with all of the things that we've all had to deal with. So certainly we're glad that we can connect through social media and on this line. So we're looking forward today to talking about different things, but we'd like to start out our program with just paying just a little tribute to Vanessa Guillen. Her funeral and memorial was this week, and certainly I'd just like to take a minute to have just a moment of silence here out of respect for her family and her loved ones, and certainly for Women Veterans One Voice and the veterans who are standing in the gap on her behalf, and all of the veterans who are victims, those who are dying out here amongst friendly fire on our military post. But certainly Vanessa Guillen, whose story has certainly ignited a different climate of concern. And we'd just like to take a minute here just to give her just her due respect. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. That was quite a reflection here as we see all of the activity from walking through the gravesite. We had Amy Serpa on with us, who just delivered such a heartfelt and warm respect for her efforts as Women Veterans One Voice, and having walked through the path where the body parts were found, we would just like to recognize and honor the work of that movement that is creating quite a momentum across the country. Women Veterans One Voice. Jessica Roque, Tara Jones, founder of the National Women Veterans Association of America out of San Diego, California, that are creating a climate of resistance against these injustices for women who are sexually assaulted. So we honor that group that are taking this hard stance against our government's overlook for what needs to happen. And somehow I believe that this time it will make a difference. So I would like to pay tribute just to that movement and those activities. Of also significance here today, one of the key topics across our country is the COVID-19, which we are all impacted and affected. We'd just like to share a little bit about the military and veterans community and how they're impacted by this virus. What we know for sure is that people are dying. We're talking nationally in the United States alone of over 6 million individuals who have been affected by this virus. We're talking about 65,000 individuals who have died from this virus. As a consequence of this virus, we have been relegated to a posture of uncertainty. And within the veterans community, which was already vulnerable to the virus of injustice, we now deal with the virus of this COVID-19 or the coronavirus. Secretary Wilkie and all of the leadership, I do believe, are overwhelmed prior to the COVID-19. And accessing health care had its challenges for many veterans across the country, throughout all of the VA hospitals. And they were challenged with responding to some of the OIG reports, the Government Affairs Office, which had also made recommendations about accessing health care, changing some of the quality of the care. That was addressed in a hearing on July 22nd with the Congressional Veterans Affairs Committee under the leadership of Congressman Mark Takano out of California, who expressed extreme frustration with the response that he received from the leadership there. And that will be a discussion for another day, but I'd like to just give some statistics about what is actually happening within the VA system here on the coronavirus deaths. As of this week, there's only over 43,000 cases tested within the VA system. Of this 43,396, which was tested at, let's go as of Tuesday of this week, 2,400 cases, or at least approximate to that number, have died. Excuse me. That was this week. The fatalities have exceeded 10,500 veterans have tested positive for the virus, and more than 1,300 have died. Okay, so these numbers are somewhat are in this chart, and I do believe I have it correctly now. 1,300 deaths are reported at the VA system, and we're talking about a very serious matter, in my opinion. What I do also understand from conversations with the research committee is that there's a backlog in reporting comorbidity and morbidity, that is, deaths and conditions that lead to death or illnesses. So there was a 10-year backlog on reporting these deaths to the centralized database system, where they have yet to update the present COVID-19 because they are still several years behind in reporting. And what we also know from this 21st century healthcare delivery system that in this year they are modernizing our system, which I think is long overdue. And part of that modernization, they are establishing what they're trying to create, what is a centralized reporting system. And my questions to the presenter on last week, in my opinion, have been unanswered because I'm very concerned about safeguarding patient data, safeguarding patient information, how information is being accessed to their new environment of network providers that are outside the VA system. So we have the COVID-19 challenged situations, and then we're going to actually extend it outside of the VA, which I think would be a double threat to the security of veterans. One thing I've learned in my own experience is the upkeep of record information. I am trying to get information from 1993 populated into my Healthy Vet, which has just been upgraded yet again. So they're upgrading systems, establishing new systems, and I'm not sure if they have ever had a working system in progress that we can depend on. It is my due diligence that I suggest to all veterans that they continue in their own record keeping and that they focus on their self-help in a way that manages their lives responsibly. I think what is happening is there's a certain revelation in our VA system that they can no longer deny. With social media, this administration has been a little bit more transparent, but they are not as transparent for taking accountability for the failed agendas and policy of past. There has been a lot of nuanced situations that have affected veterans from all war eras that, in my opinion, causes the VA to take a position of defense. And I think in taking that defense position, they failed to give the veteran the respect and the affirmation of their concerns when they report their experiences. And it is my belief that when we have these compounded platforms, whether it is in the healthcare, the clinical, or the administrative, that there needs to be some independent oversight, which I believe the Congress is trying to do. So they have the Women Veterans Task Force, which is not the very first task force that they've had. They had a task force under General Shinseki. So the accuracy of the information that transfers throughout these administrations, I think, should be in question because they have yet to hear from the veterans. While I listened to the 8 hours or more of testimony from providers and nonprofit leaders, I failed to hear any fundamental significance to the transitional role by which the veterans have had to endure all of these different changes. However, all of these different changes has not improved in the life of veterans, but it has created constant barriers and continually to grow in terms of the challenges with resolving the issues. So we have I Am Not Invisible, we have Stop the Harassment, but we have yet to hear how these policy and legislative agendas will impact the quality of life for the veteran. That the veteran come back and say, I myself have had a better experience based on this policy or that policy. I find that to be a challenge. And I am not sure if we can depend on the perspectives of those who are there. Their roles are unique to their position, whether they are political appointees or they're federal employees. There's a certain boundary that is placed there if they're not communicating with the grassroots, the advocates, the veterans themselves. So I think there needs to be a realistic approach to how they respect the voice of the veteran. And I think Women Veterans One Voice will be one key platform that will continue to grow to make that a lessened obstacle for moving the agenda forward. So with 2,000 deaths on the COVID-19, The National Cemetery Association has modernized its burial processes and procedures. And these services, which are very important to the veterans community, being buried in the burial sites of honor, military burial, and memorials and ceremonies are very patriotic. And I was very proud to see the representation, certainly at this funeral and this week. But we must be diligent in the ceremonials for understanding how that impacts the everyday life of veterans. I think that's going to be one of the most important challenges if we are not surpassing the bureaucratic rhetoric that continues to grow that barrier between the veteran and that outcome. There has to be measurables. So we have the research community that presents information based on secondary data. And what I understand from my reading and research is that the research data that they're using oftentimes is outdated. It certainly was my experience. I didn't find any recent research data that was evidence-based. It was not reliable because it was secondary data. So the researchers who have access to patients' records, which I do think also there should be some notification when a patient record is accessed, despite who is accessing that record. So we are accessing patient records for research, and apparently they are only receiving the data that the report requires just to get significant information for whatever research that is. Various studies, which there are many, there are millions of our federal dollars going into research projects with no deliverable outcome that says, well, from this research, we have identified this, and we need to do that. Many of the research agendas are outside of the VA. And when they send their report in, we don't know how they're tracking it because they don't have the kind of tracking agenda in the 21st century that we can rely on. So I'm just going to say my critique on that administration because they are trying to do something, but we shall yet see what that something shall be in the end. This week's program is the beginning of what I believe to be a very important platform for disseminating information. I have listened, I have read, I have heard, I've communicated across many platforms over the past 30 years. And I can assure you that there are no two platforms synonymous with what is necessary to have a conversation about the issues facing women veterans today. And in so doing this program and planning it, I realized that there needed to be some historical reference to the significance of what has transpired over the years. And we have many platforms of individuals who believe that they are experienced, but there's a certain level of knowledge. And what was the most embarrassing was the hearings of July 22nd, both 2 days of hearings. And Congressman Mark Takano expressed his frustration with so many dead spaces and asking questions. And the Deputy Secretary, Pamela Powers, she responded with little to no knowledge. It was very difficult to watch. And I wrote a letter to them and expressed my frustration as a veteran because this is where legislation and budgeting and funding could be very helpful to do many things. But I think that was a failed agenda. But I'm going to continue on with my pursuit to get needed hearings. And we are now dealing with hearings for Vanessa Gillian, and certainly we listened to Penn Thayan, who is incarcerated in a Navy prison. And we must have these conversations. But I do believe that individual agendas must be collective because there is no one person experiencing any one thing in the military. So we have these isolated events that we are creating huge, huge momentum on. But we must make sure that we are basing them on policy and laws by which the laws can be addressed because you cannot legislate compassion. So what it brings me to my understanding of yet another response to this issue, the Ferris Supreme Court decision. So when you're talking about what recourse do we have as veterans and the families who suffer when there are violations and abuses to military service members, beyond the UCMJ, I'm learning from speaking to very expert individuals that there are recourses. And in that, I have understood that the most important of these platforms are that there can be class action lawsuits by family members and individuals when they have been abused by our military. So what they have is tort claims. Okay? So if your family member or a spouse or a child can sue the United States, then we should be doing that for wrongful death. And I want to just leave this information out here. If you would visit Ferris versus United States, it's a 1950 Supreme Court ruling. Matter of fact, it says it combines 3 federal cases. And I think it is important that we have knowledge and information that allows us to be empowered so that we can defend ourselves. But we must be clear as to how we approach this, because I'm hearing a lot of information that's lacking very fundamentals on military protocols, regulations, laws, or anything. And I was in a online Zoom conference with LULAC yesterday, and I heard from 4 military officers who had served for up to 30 years, 22 years, war college graduates, military officers that had been involved in many complex platforms, from JAG officers. They were all there discussing Gillian's case, but they were doing so with the assumption that she had been sexually assaulted and raped on the military installation. Now, my concern is that I contacted Fort Hood 2 weeks ago, and I learned from the public affairs officer that there was an ongoing case there, a 15-6 investigation, which on yesterday it was released. And the interesting thing about this case is that as much as we are talking about this case, someone has to be a voice of reason when you're dealing with the neutrality on what's real and what's not real. So we created a climate of rape culture. We are saying things like rape is running rampant in the military, and all of those things may very well be true. But there's a certain advocacy that is inspiring a different mindset about what the military is when we join our armed forces. And I think there's a lack of accuracy when we focus our national defense on other issues. So there needs to be an independent, which I think this is what many of the hearings have tried to do. They're looking to get an independent external entity to investigate these cases. I'm not sure how quickly that's going to happen. I've never believed it's going to happen because there's so many other parts of the sexual assault that we don't talk about out here. But they do talk about it on the other side of the federal government and within the ranks. So when we are talking on the outside as advocates, as civilians, we're talking about the compassion, the things that we know to be right and what's wrong. But when they are investigating these cases, they're investigating not just the situation, the cases, but they're investigating the lives, the character. They look at the records of these individuals for proclivity to behave in a certain way, and that is very important. The military codes of conduct, whether you're behaving unbecoming, certainly is a violation of what we know to be soldier or military protocols. So when we don't defend the fact that we are violating that uniform code of military justice, they're saying, okay, well, when it comes to rape and we believe that we can be naked or that we can drink and, behave in a manner that should not be judged on how we behave. When the military investigate those cases, they look at all of that because there's always a defense for the person or the perpetrator or the person who's being accused. So whatever that defense is includes them looking back at the accuser. And what I know is true from my own experience is that when I was part of the Pentagon 15-6 investigation that founded my case, I was judged. And it was tried in my immediate environment to be proven that I was a different person than I was. But I think it's also important to note that these military veterans deserve to have their voices heard. They deserve to have justice. They deserve to have their cases heard. And I think this is what's going to happen when we continue to move forward with these investigations and these platforms for how they will have to deal with these veterans and how they must deal with what the realities are. But they're not going to ignore the facts as they investigate these cases. Everything is going to be investigated. And for that reality must be accepted. And it's hard to explain it to people. But the law in the military is not the same as public opinion in our military. And I think I understand that clearly from my own case. So, look, I'm just going to take a little minute right now to regroup and get ready for our second segment of this program. Please stay with us. This is Kathy Santos, host, Women Veterans Speak. We'll be back in a second. Thank you. Thank you for staying with us here So we're heading into our second segment, and I covered a little bit about just some of the information. I just want to go on record here. These programs are archived, and they will be posted on our website. So we are continually to document what I think is relevant information. And as much as it may not sound relevant now, but it certainly will be relevant in the future as we continue to archive our information and grow the platform. Certainly this outreach will be a key platform for our future data gathering. And we want to make sure that we are using it wisely by putting out valid information, researched information, and certainly that it will guide into a conversation that becomes respected by our military community and certainly for impacting change. What I do know is happening is that we are using social media in such a profound way, but we must have some centralized way to filter much of the conversation for those who are not yet on the legislation and advocacy arena. And this is where some of the key challenges are communicating through the many channels and navigating across these various complex platforms. What I do understand also is that the congressional hearings that we've just experienced and the Department of Veterans Affairs and across many federal agencies, there are some fragmented conversations about how they should respond to us. And I'm not sure what the objective is, but I think it's going to cause for the women veterans movement to move into that area and make some serious demands as to how they are being affected, because they're very capable. Women veterans are very, very capable of speaking out on how they are being affected by these things. And I think this is what Vanessa Gillian represents. She represents speaking from the grave. Everybody feels what happened here in some way. And I think this is going to be what is going to be paramount for how we overcome many of our issues. So I see that there are callers on the line, and I do apologize, but there is a need for conversation and a little preparation when we're talking across so many different issues. This is going to be an opportunity for those who have messages, if you're interested in participating in our future programs, that you contact our office through our website or through our social media network and make sure that we know what issues are important to you so we can get them in our programming format. And that would be very important for us. I really want to lay out some fundamentals here in how we must take lead on these transitioning roles we have as military people. We must not allow, particularly civilians or those who have not served, to create the narrative as to what policy should sound like, what our lives should sound like. There's a lot of contracting and misleading efforts based on information from those who have never actually, what I call the foxhole experience. They never had it. So we must be diligent for challenging these particular conversations. We must read legislation. We must respond to legislation and create those platforms in our cities and across our state where there is none to make sure that our voices are heard. And I think that is extremely important. My motto has been women veterans front and center. And that response, I think, is great because there are women veterans that are standing up in key roles, running for office, leading nonprofits, but we must come together on the key issues when we're talking about policy and legislation. I want to just move along with talk a little bit more about the details of the Vanessa Gillian case. And what I'm certain about is that the report that came out on yesterday may be challenged by others who have been with the belief that Vanessa Gillian was murdered by someone that wanted to silence her because she had informed her family members that she had been sexually harassed. Particular incidences that they reference is someone spying on her while she took a shower. And spying on an individual while they take a shower, I'm not sure if they say that is sexual harassment. Those are voyeurs that we know, peepers, spiers, but this is a case where I want the VA, the Department of Defense, Pentagon, all concerned, to ensure that this injustice is reported wherever those violations are in the life of this young lady, because there seem to be so many different layers here of what could possibly be a violation, whether she reported it or whether she didn't report it, who did she report to, and why did they not respond. There have been 2 deaths in this situation of concern to me. A young 20-year-old that's been reported as committing suicide. Well, the report says, he is has not been investigated, and they have found that there was no correlation between him committing suicide, this particular person, he was not an NCO, he was not her superior, and they have not identified a relationship with them that he would have killed her. And even more critical to this case is that they have not identified her body. So who did they bury? And why would they allow the family to assume that that was her body if they knew that they didn't have a DNA verified? This is what the report said. It was reported on Texas News, KSAT.com. Please look it up. So they did not have a body that they had yet verified as Vanessa Gillian. But the family had assumed that's who they were burying, I'm sure, yesterday. That's who I thought I was watching in the funeral. I had no idea there was a question about whose body that was. So we know that that body was found in 3 different locations because Women Veterans One Voice showed us. They walked the path through all 3 grave sites where somebody had dug holes and buried her body parts. So we know that to be true. My question is, why is there so much irresponsibility on the part of the Department of Defense when the President of the United States actually met with the family? We have outrage from all of the leaders, Silva Garcia, who's a congresswoman down in Washington, D.C., and this is the best that we get. This is the problem. This is the problem. And I do believe that somewhere somebody needs to start to make sense about government issues. We're looking at our federal government, America's government, and we're playing around with words, people's lives, and it seems ridiculous, federal government of the United States, not to have the ability to give a better response to this family, or that they are manipulating these processes to this extent. So it almost seems like there's a political agenda or some other agenda. Why not just give the family what you have? Why not just answer the family's questions? So here we are a day after all of this, and the day is a funeral. I do believe there's going to be a funeral there at the funeral home where she will probably be utilized on the day or at some point following this. But we're saying that we do not know that that's her actual remains. Well, whose remains are they? And why can't that be established from her DNA? Bones have DNA. Tissue have DNA. I'm baffled. Why Vanessa Guillen, an active duty specialist, mutilated by someone, murdered by someone, she died with dignity because none of that came up. But after the fact, who was this young lady and why can't we find out the circumstances surrounding her death? This is my quest. I'm going to continue to stay with this issue and report on this because I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I sense when there is a cover-up or some more clandestine activities that are important, because there has been more than one case recently reported of mutilated bodies on these posts. Fort Hood is just one of the posts where there are issues. When will they expose the other posts? When will they expose the others? Vanessa Guillen has become the poster child for what we know is going on. But what about the others? So she's going to raise the awareness about the cover-ups and the clandestine activities that's going on in these posts. What's behind it? What is the motivating factor for mutilating a human body? That is the key question. Why would someone do that? I Googled mutilated bodies and I found old movie Scarface. That's what came up. Mutilated body, Scarface. And rituals. There is a religious practice that mutilates people's bodies. How can another human being focus on mutilate another human being? That would be a very difficult thing for me to imagine. So as we move forward into getting more revelation about this practice or this issue, that I hope that there will be closure in the family to Ms. Guillen, and that any other cases will be a part of any revelation investigation in ending what it seems to be something serious going on in our military installations and on our military posts. Whether it's human trafficking, whatever the issue is, there's something very serious going on in these military posts, which is there to defend us. These people take the oath of office to defend our Constitution, foreign and domestic, against enemies that would try to harm us. And we are focused on issues within the ranks that compromises that role. So we become very vulnerable as a country and being protected because we are so busy dealing with what is this, friendly fire, domestic terror, whatever it's called. It must be addressed, and I'm grateful for those who are out there working in that effort. Again, this is Kathy Santos, host to Women Veterans Speak, and we are moving along here on our Saturday afternoon broadcast, and we are documenting and archiving these messages so that we can continue to refer to them for what is to come. This will not be the end of the investigation. This will not be the end of talking about Vanessa Guillen or the others that are experiencing death, abuse, and violations within our ranks. So we're talking about abuses within our ranks. So can that be defined? What is abuse? I am concerned that when we talk about abuses, do we understand military protocols, and do we understand authority, subordination, the kind of things that put us in position where our interpretation about what abuses is could be how we feel our perception. So I was very concerned about a case that is being addressed very aggressively by the family of Ohu. She has a social media presence, Justice for Ohu. She's presently incarcerated. Let me just read to you what her family says about her. I'm Santhaya Ohu. She is a survivor of a sexual assault. She is an active duty member of the Marine Corps. Her sexual assault case was mishandled by her command. She has been dealing through mental health issues. She had an incident back in April which led to her arrest. She was not sent to jail, only to a mental health unit. then transported into another intensive program. She recently got out of an intensive military care unit only to be immediately placed at the Naval Consolidated Brig in Chesapeake, Virginia. Her incarceration is hindering her treatment. She is placed on minimal standard of living with solitary confinement. She is still there, receiving little to no help and mental health services. Her punishment is thought to be a retaliation for the mishandling of her sexual assault report. If there is anyone in the area that can place eyes on Thaya O, her family would appreciate the coordination with her sister Pan Thaya. Her email is panthayu@ymail.com. There's a address here, Corporal Thayu Oho, Thaeohu, P.O. Box 800, Chesapeake, Virginia 23322. Let her story be known and bring her home. So, one of the things that I know about the military when you're responding to retaliation, they watch you for potential suicide, they watch you for potential escape, they watch you for different things, and they put you in confined environments. I know, I was there. So, what the interpretation of a military confinement could be for her own protection. And that is a way that I am interpreting this, that this young lady who has reported sexual assault, she's now been incarcerated and she's in a mental health unit. So she's in a mental health unit probably because they're watching her for suicide or other mental health issues, which they must protect her from herself or from anybody else. This is just the way it's done. So I've asked the family members if I could speak with her, and I hope to just to provide some military understanding on the protocols here and help her to have some relief that the advocacy as being encouraged by other officers will bring attention to this. However, we do not understand the dynamics of this case sufficiently for drawing a conclusion. It's just said that she got in some trouble. It doesn't say what her trouble was. And I think that is important. But we are going to continue to follow this and support the family. The family of these military service members, it's important that they understand that on the other side of the oath, there is a very unique culture specific to service in our armed forces. Most of the laws that govern the military services are established in Congress. They're established in Congress, and they're already written. They have federal guidelines, regulations, and rules. The UCMJ, Geneva Convention, and various other governing documented platforms that govern the existence of our military. And that lack of understanding sometimes allows us to see things and misinterpret things when our role in the military is usually distinguishable by the oath of office. Do you swear? And swearing into the military disconnects us because we swear to serve the Constitution of the United States, and our rights to function the way we know people on the outside are uniquely cut off. They don't exist. So I'm not sure how she's able to communicate outward, but I find it very honorable that the military has allowed her to communicate with her family and to have that exchange. I'm going to continue to follow this story on Women Veterans Speak, and hopefully that I will get a chance to speak to the family. And this is the, as we conclude toward the end of this broadcast, I really want the Ladies Foundation. I saw that there were callers there, but I'm going to invite them to call back on next week so that we can identify with this. I did make a promotion today that we were allowing individuals to participate in one of our contributions by a sponsor to provide a little tour. It's a cruise that's happening for those who are in San Diego area that they could participate in just a little me time. One of our sponsors was able to purchase and provide for us a meal on the Spirit of San Diego, where they would cruise out and have a little me time. And I think that we're going to continue to push that and make that one of our giveaways. Certainly, we don't have a need for it over here on the East Coast, but we have also the Spirit of Baltimore, the Spirit of the Potomac, Spirit of Washington, where we have the same offer, and we would like to extend that. But I want to hear from the Midwest. I want to hear from the Southeast. I want to hear from the Northwest. I want to hear from different areas of our country where these women veterans are rural and lacking access. We want to hear from them. They seem to be isolated, and we only hear from them if there's a legislator that brings them into our presence. So I'm going to continue to reach out to the communities across the country. I have a way to promote this program that they can participate, and hopefully they will have some eyes and ears close to Washington, D.C. that will communicate their issues, whether there's a VA hospital, whether they are getting the type of protection from the COVID-19 virus. Are they being tested? How are they being treated? Is their environment safe? I think it's all important for women veterans who are accessing VA healthcare and the VA healthcare system all over this country. So my foundational conversation today was deliberate. It was deliberate for laying a foundation. This platform will continue to grow. We will continue to push forward. We will have other participants and hosts on our program that will deliver on their issues, and we will continue to grow this. And certainly we will reach our 100,000 mark for listeners as we move forward. I do know that this is important that they hear from us, and certainly we want to have the type of integrity that we bring, the kind of information that helps to bring some clarification and resolution to the issues that we deal with as women veterans. It is very important that the next generation of Iraq soldiers and young soldiers, and who knows what the future looks like as far as war, that may require another generation of soldiers. We want them to see that there's a blueprint that they can navigate for help. And I'm certain that this movement in California that are now touching bases all across this country, Women Veterans One Voice, will certainly make a difference for all veterans across this country. We want to hear from you. This is Kathy Santos, Women Veterans Speak. We do speak. And oftentimes we speak better for ourselves than anyone else could expect to speak for us. And so I'm grateful that you all have joined us on today. I'm grateful that this conversation continues to grow across communities. We can educate. We're talking about research. We're talking about the scientific impact on our care. Let's talk about experimentation. Let's talk about pharmaceuticals, clinical trials, blind studies. We will advance our conversation into some very complicated areas where we're talking about comorbidity, morbidity. What are some of the agendas? How do they measure the research agendas? What are some of the outcomes? What are some of the qualifying data? What are some of the adverse conditions that they overlook when they have used clinical trials, pharmaceutical trials on veterans? What happens when the liver and the kidney is affected and the consequence is irreversible? How will we begin to address those issues, very complex scientific issues? Who should be held accountable? Can we talk about rape culture and malfeasance, malpractice? Can we talk about these kind of issues in the same conversation? Will that be relevant? I think so. It is not just about rape culture. There are heightened levels of scientific complexities that must be integrated into the dialogue on rape culture. This is just not a one-dimensional approach to advocacy. This is a multidimensional platform, multi-causal, multi-effects in our lives. So we must begin to think beyond the rape culture. There is a very significant aspect of scientific analysis that we must address as veterans. Reoccurring cancers. Let us talk about those kinds of things. This is time that we begin to address the complexities of our care. We become victimized, and we will remain victim, and we are not astute on the multidimensional aspect for analyzing and evaluating not only our care but our providers. Are they qualified? Are they trained? What is the significance of that? The significance of this in America is that our VA system has become something other than a healthcare system for veterans. We have the spouses, we have other things going on. And we want to know how that can be transparent, how the individuals and the providers can become more transparent to us. We have every right to know, but we have to know what questions to ask. And we will ask those questions. We will deal with the research, the data analysis that's available to us. We will demand that data be collected on significant aspects of our care, the ethnic roles, the very unique treatment methodologies, what modalities impact not only the ethnic and the cultural emphasis, but what about the geographical emphasis? Who are the providers? We need to know who they are. Where do they come from? There is an answer to these questions. And Women Veterans Speak, we will be that impetus for seeking answers, resolutions, and change. Again, this is Kathy Santos, host, Women Veterans Speak. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me on today. Please refer to our website that is under construction for upgrading, and you will find all of these archived recordings there from 2009 when we started this program. It will now be 11 years that people are not even aware that we had quite an audience, being the only platform for disseminating information across social media. So we are grateful today that the platform now is all inclusive. We are doing it. We're doing it all. We have all professions amongst us as women veterans, and certainly we will move this agenda forward. I will continue to stay in the trenches despite my work as a researcher, despite my work as an advocate. We will continue to use this platform to articulate. Please join me on August the 29th as on America's Heroes Group. It's another online radio program out of Chicago. We are certainly glad to be partnering with them, the Congressional Black Caucus Veterans Brain Trust. There are actually several other platforms that we are very delighted to be a part of. I'm certainly excited that this is one that exists for us to share. Kathy Santos, Women Veterans Speak. See you next week, same time, next Saturday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Please have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.